So, I got this problem. Go and type historically inaccurate movies into Google or YouTube. Go ahead, do it. Right now. I'll wait. Well, it took you fucking long enough. I'll bet what came up is article after article and video after video shitting on a film because it's historically inaccurate. It didn't happen that way. They just made that part up. And I have a problem with this. Is it interesting to know what's true and what isn't? Of course it is. But when a movie has detractors only because it's historically inaccurate, that's just a fucking dog shit take. Call me a plebe. Call me a simple-minded buffoon. But I'll bet I'm not the only one out there who feels this way about critics who wield historical inaccuracy like it's a fucking movie-slaying weapon. However, there aren't many people making videos defending that opinion. So I'm here to set things right. This is a video not only defending some of my absolute favorite historically inaccurate films, but also going a step further and explaining why I think historical inaccuracy was required to make these films as good as they are. This is not to say that there aren't amazing movies that are accurate, but that's another video for another time. And if you're one of those people I was talking about who bitches and moans that a movie didn't happen that way, go edit a fucking Wikipedia article or whatever the fuck you weirdos do. I swear, man, no fucking taste. But first, my own personal criteria. This is what went into my thinking when I picked the movies for this video. The movie must have been marketed, framed, or sold to audiences as a true story. Like, when the average person went to see these movies when they were released, they initially thought, oh, this is a true story. Inglourious Bastards, 300, and Pocahontas are not going to be on this list because nobody who went to see those movies actually believed in them. Pocahontas is on double secret probation from this list because it's a cartoon. There are plenty of historical inaccuracies in it, but I'm pretty sure they didn't break out in song or talk to fucking trees either. Like, come the fuck on. The main character must have been real. Name changes are okay, as long as there was a real person behind that name. Otherwise, it's not really a true story from the get-go. You won't find Gladiator or Gangs of New York on here, because although Commodus and Bill the Butcher were real, Maximus and Amsterdam were not. Like Pocahontas, this throws off the believability of the rest of the film for me. The movie must also not be about a real person metaphorically. This is not the same thing as a name change, because these movies were not sold as true stories. Citizen Kane is supposed to be about William Randolph Hearst. The Master is supposed to be about L. Ron Hubbard. The Departed is supposed to be about Whitey Bulger. Supposed to. You see where I'm going with this? These were not sold as the true stories of the real people they were inspired by. The inaccuracies must be factually disprovable. Fargo says it's based on a true story, but that was either a made-up statement or a combination of different stories that have become untraceable at this point. The films must have enough inaccuracy that the core plot, tone, or themes would have been different if they hadn't changed anything. The changes must have been required to make the movie what it is. The Pursuit of Happiness, Spartacus, Lust for Life, Schindler's List, Casino, Tombstone, and The Bridge on the River Kwai all have some researchable historical inaccuracies, but there weren't enough in them to make a thesis out of. The entire film wouldn't have felt radically different if these changes weren't made. Last but not least, I need to have enjoyed the film. Because that's what it's all about, baby! Oh, and it should go without saying, there's gonna be some spoilers in some of these movies. But I mean, like, most of them have been out for years, so, just proceed with caution. Remember the Titans. Let's start small. Remember the Titans has an obvious historical inaccuracy. By 1971, when the movie takes place, high schools had already been integrated. The Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964, so by the time this all happened, T.C. Williams High School and all the schools they played had been integrated for years. There probably wasn't nearly as much racial tension at that point, considering some of these kids had known each other since middle school. But the movie wanted to convey a message of racial harmony through teamwork. I think it worked. I love this movie. Kingdom of Heaven works in a similar vein. In real life, Balian, Baldwin, and Saladin were all devoutly religious and were not even halfway as tolerant of their enemies as they're depicted. But the movie wanted to convey a message of religious harmony in a place that hasn't ever really had any. So I love this movie for the same reason. The Elephant Man. Well, for starters, his name was Joseph Merrick, not John Merrick. Minor detail, though. What isn't so minor is the fact that in real life, the Elephant Man wasn't some carny's prisoner. That was his job, and the only way he could actually earn a living. The carny was his boss, who paid him fairly. Now, his childhood was shitty, his life outside of work wasn't great, and his rise to real celebrity out of the sideshow world was pretty accurate in the film. But the Elephant Man was the person the film chose to represent its lesson in human dignity, so that sadistic carny was a welcome addition in my book. Wait, is carny a slur? Am I gonna get canceled for this? Oh, also, Ellie died at age 27, which makes him the original member of the 27 Club. The Social Network. In some ways, the big inaccuracy in this film comes down to whose side the movie is on. The plot can be boiled down to the story of why Eduardo Saverin is suing Mark Zuckerberg for lowering his shares in Facebook down to a negligible amount, even though Facebook was the company that he helped create. The movie frames Zuckerberg as a geeky little dweeb who's insecure because he doesn't think that girls like him, and Eduardo as a key component of the company who was done dirty by his best friend. But in reality, Eduardo was neglectful and incompetent, squandering the opportunity that Zuck gave him, wasting time and money goofing off in New York while Mark and the boys were working hard in California. Also, Zuck didn't start Facebook because a girl dumped him. His wife has been with him since before Facebook, so he must have done something right. Does the film have the wrong hero? It seems that way. But the entertainment value was worth it because these characters, true or false, are so fun to watch. Maybe this one's personal, but having gotten banned on Facebook numerous times for saying funny things or having funny opinions, I think this version of Mark Zuckerberg, a little insecure fucking rat scuttling around, stealing the ideas of others, stabbing his friends in the back, is applicable even if it's not true. Catch Me If You Can. Okay, this one is one of my favorites. Catch Me If You Can is about conman Frank Abagnale Jr., who stole millions by forging checks when he was still a teenager, traveling from state to state and internationally under false identities. He led multiple fake lives. He convinced people he was an airline pilot, a doctor, and a lawyer. And, like any good con man, he embellished the absolute fuck out of his exploits. Millions? It was more like tens of thousands. Airline pilot? Well, he stalked a stewardess, got her family to give him room and board, and then ripped them off via writing their own checks out to himself. He also got caught and arrested a whole bunch of times in between his little escapades. Not just once at the end of the movie after his whole adventure was coming to a close. He didn't work for the FBI at the end, he gave anti-crime seminars. So how does this one make the movie better? Well, how about the fact that you just got conned by the fucking con man in the movie that you're watching? You just got trolled by the ultimate troll through a movie screen. A man whose entire life is a lie, getting a movie made about his life under the guise of it being the truth, and then conning viewers into believing it? Frank Abagnale, I salute you. You a real one. Or a fake one, I guess. Lawrence of Arabia. You'd already have to take this film with a grain of salt because it was based on T.E. Lawrence's own autobiography. But there are things that Lawrence mentions in his biography that don't sound like something a man would make up about himself. And some of these were left out of the movie. One thing people like to point out is that the real T.E. Lawrence was gay. Although in fairness, there isn't really anything inaccurate about this in the film, because the movie never shows Lawrence getting his fuck on with the ladies. As a matter of fact, I don't think there are even any women in the movie. But there was another thing about his sex life that was interesting. There is a scene in the movie that, if it had been accurate, would have had a wildly different tone. There is a famous scene in the movie where Lawrence is beaten, tortured, and possibly sexually assaulted with a whip. It isn't clear how far it goes, but it's traumatizing, and Lawrence is a changed man after the incident, which only serves to further push him into the inner darkness he has tried to resist up to this point. But in real life... Oh my god, this is juicy. In real life, Lawrence was a masochist, and has written that the incident turned him on. This absolutely had to be changed for the film. Otherwise, this thematically important scene would have turned the entire rest of the movie into a comedy. Changing the man's real-life reaction to this one scene was fucking critical for people to take this film seriously. T.E. Lawrence is portrayed as both an exhibitionist and someone fighting for the cause of a people, a hero and a war criminal, a man with enough compassion to ride into the desert to save a man who was left behind, but with enough conviction to blow that same guy's brains out when he threatens to compromise a mission. This complex character balance that the movie tries so hard to maintain would have completely fallen apart by showing the guy getting a stiffy from an ass whooping. The Irishman. I loved The Irishman. It was the last movie I saw in theaters, and yes, I actually went to see this 3.5 hour long movie in theaters, not on Netflix. And it was worth it. Is the de-aging dumb? Yes, at first, but your eyes get used to it. Does the beatdown scene look terrible? Of course, but so did the beating Sonny lays down in The Godfather, and that's still one of my favorite movies. And as far as historical inaccuracy is concerned, they nailed the setting. But what they didn't get right was also the most central thing to the plot, which is that Frank Sheeran did not kill Jimmy Hoffa. Hell, he didn't kill Crazy Joe. Fuck, honestly, there are some sources that say he didn't kill nearly as many people as the movie says he did. Now, that last part is hard to prove. The mob isn't exactly known for just telling all their secrets to the general public. However, real-life mobsters no longer in the life, most notably Michael Francis, have said that they know beyond a reasonable doubt that Frank Sheeran did not kill these guys. And that's okay. The people who went to see this movie because it was the true story of what happened to Jimmy Hoffa could have stayed home and watched one of the 1,000 inconclusive documentaries about the guy. Or the movie Hoffa, which is also a good movie. Point is, this was a movie. Sheeran killing Hoffa is necessary as a statement on friendship versus duty, or on having to choose between two friends. Sheeran is a remorseless killer until he has to kill one of his best friends. That's the emotional crux of the movie, and it needed the fib to get there. Amadeus, 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 Amadeus. Here's one that appears on a lot of these lists, and the explanation is a little long, so bear with me. The very plot of this movie, that Salieri plotted to take away Mozart's career, sanity, and even his life, was based on the ramblings of an old man with dementia. In his last years, Salieri had mush brain, and did claim to have killed Mozart, and did even attempt suicide. An urban legend spawned out of these incidents that got so popular that many plays were written about it, even before the one that the film is based on. But there is absolutely no evidence that this ever happened. Although no one knows how Mozart died, in real life, Salieri and Mozart were peers, rivals, and occasionally work buddies, whose meanest thoughts about each other were captured in private letters to friends and family. As for the men themselves, Salieri's personality is very fictionalized. He did not have an egotistical love-hate relationship with God. He wasn't chaste. He had a wife and a bunch of kids. He wasn't this revenge-obsessed composer living in the shadow of someone younger and prettier. I would like to point out, though, that their portrayal of Mozart was very accurate. All that shit about Mozart composing pieces when he was 4, being able to play a piece of music just from hearing it once, playing piano upside down, all the stuff that sounds more like it was made up was actually true. And so was his personality. He was a lewd, perverted party animal who loved music, fame, and debauchery and just wanted to have a good time. So why does the lie work? Well, because it spawned one of the darkest and most different biopics ever committed to film. The super talented, fun-loving Mozart is completely oblivious to the schemes of the evil, jealous Salieri, which makes his increasingly awful plots of revenge against the man who really has not wronged him outside of his own brain thoughts pretty hard to watch at times. And Salieri is the narrator. He's the one taking you by the hand and leading you down this awful path that could only have one ending. And when it's all over, you feel dirty for having watched it. And that is good movie. The Untouchables. This one might be the most historically inaccurate movie on the list. Okay, so Elliot Ness and Al Capone were real, and the first was chasing the second. Capone was a ruthless killer. They did eventually get him on tax evasion, But basically, the entire film between point A and point B never happened. The Canadian shootout didn't happen. The train station shootout didn't happen. Capone just fucking murdering cops didn't happen. Elliot Ness throwing Frank Nitti off the roof of a fucking courthouse definitely did not fucking happen. The only movie I've seen that's less historically accurate than The Untouchables is Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And I still love this movie because without these scenes, the movie would have been about some guy sitting in an office looking over tax forms. That's fucking boring. I have similar feelings about The Lion in Winter. That movie is a whole lot of made up shit too, and for the same reason. Because otherwise the film would have just been about a king trying to decide who to make his heir. Adding all that family dysfunction into the movie made it entertaining. And now, the one you've all been waiting for. The movie that everyone loves to shit on because of how historically inaccurate it is. The one that you probably clicked on this video just to hear me talk about. Braveheart. I'll be honest with you, when it comes to plot, Braveheart is 90% bullshit. I think it's slightly more accurate than The Untouchables, but considering that movie is one step above outright fiction, that's not saying much. It was based on a poem written about 100 years after William Wallace's death, by a blind guy. So even if the guy was there, he wouldn't have actually seen. Now, it would be easier to name the things in the movie that actually happened. William Wallace existed. That's about it. Nah, I'm kidding. There's a little bit more. He was tortured and executed as well. Longshanks really did occupy and try to subjugate Scotland. Edward II really was gay, and his wife really was the Princess of France. She did have a child out of wedlock who became the next king, and she really did have her husband assassinated, which she promises to do at the end of the movie. If you really want to read something horrifying, look up how he was assassinated. And that's it. That's all, folks. Now on to the stuff they made up. Although Longshanks was a tyrant in Scotland, there is no evidence that prima nocta was ever a thing. There is certainly no evidence that he put his own fucking daughter-in-law in harm's way to strike a deal with his mortal enemy. William Wallace didn't get to fuck a royal princess from the royal family and was not her real baby daddy. Now on to William himself. He was not some rural commoner like in the movie. He was actually one of the nobles. Yes, he was one of those guys quarreling at the table. And Robert the Bruce did not betray him. Oh, and last but not least, Scots didn't wear kilts until like some 200 years later. So why am I down with these changes? Alright, prima nocta and the fling with the princess. These are people's two biggest problems with the movie. And, although funny when you actually step back and think about them, these things both make Longshanks a better villain. And mission accomplished, because Longshanks is one of my favorite movie bad guys ever. In this movie, Longshanks is the kind of scumbag that would legalize raping a man's wife on his wedding night. He's also the kind of scumbag who would put his own daughter-in-law in harm's way as a power play. A power play which backfires, as William Wallace has a power play of his own. His dick. Yeah, he cucks Longshanks good. And this sort of persecution is what shapes Wallace into one of my favorite movie good guys ever. This man is tired of the daily unjust horrors his people are being put through, and knows it's time for a change. A protagonist doesn't always have to be complex. Sometimes you just want to root for the guy who believes in something better and wants to make it happen. And also, because he cucks the guy doing all this horrible shit to him. That's pretty fucking awesome. Okay, now William. Yes, he was a noble. However, he and Robert the Bruce did manage to get their country shit together long enough to fight the English. And Robert the Bruce didn't betray William, but try and tell me that the betrayal scene in this movie isn't one of the most well-acted scenes of despair without a word of dialogue in film history. It's tragic and it's beautiful, and it touches something deep inside of me. Don't get any funny ideas. On to the kilts, and this one really boils my piss. Did any of you know that the kilts weren't accurate before you either looked it up or some douchebag pointed it out to you in another video? Were you actually aware the first time you watched Braveheart that this was inaccurate? Unless you're from Scotland or you specialize in Scottish history, my guess is no. Nobody thought twice about this when they first watched this movie. So why does it bother you now? I will admit there is some personal bias here for all of these movies, but especially for Braveheart. Braveheart is one of, if not my absolute favorite film of all time. But even with me praising it, it doesn't have to be yours. None of these movies do. Maybe Braveheart just ain't your kind of movie. That's okay. But if your only reason for turning your back on all it has to offer is that it's not historically accurate, fuck you. My argument with Braveheart and all of these movies is that historical inaccuracy often helps movies more than it hurts them. It makes them better movies, either because it allows the plot to be conveyed in a way that's easier to commit to film, or, more importantly, because changing events makes a movie more exciting, engaging, or emotional. It makes for a better product. It makes for better art. They say art imitates life, but that imitation is never perfect. It's not supposed to be. Otherwise, it wouldn't be art. Hating a movie because that's not how it happened is like hating Starry Night because the sky doesn't actually look like that. Of course it fucking doesn't. That wasn't the point. If your only hang-up on a film is its inaccuracy of real-life events, you're a shitty critic. You're a shittick. And you have a dog-shit take on movies. You'll never understand what us plebes already know, which is that historically inaccurate movies are awesome. But so are some historically accurate films. Next time, Gadget. Next time. Hey, thanks so much for watching the Plebe's first YouTube video. Yeah, that's right. This was Baby's first YouTube vid. Hell yeah. Feel free to support me on Patreon. I don't have any real big reward tiers or not. I just have a $1 donation. You can find it in the links below. I got some sticks in the fire for my next videos. Stay tuned.